Most South Africans looking to become entrepreneurs do so because the job market space has dwindled. These are some of the key findings by a report by the GEM National Entrepreneurial Context Index. Joining us to give us more insight is Professor Natanya Meyer from the University of Johannesburg and co-author of the Stellenbosch Business School South Africa Entrepreneurship Monitor Report. Professor Meyer, good afternoon. Robert, thanks so much for speaking to us. What are some of the key highlights from the GEM SA report?
Yes, thank you. I think one of the main things that we've picked up is that we are returning to base figures pre-COVID, in some indicators even lower. But I think what I would like to highlight is the total early stage entrepreneurial activity, or TI as we refer to it, which is one of our base indicators that we measure. Now, the GEM has been measuring this for the past 23 years, so we've got quite a trend to see what's been happening in the past few years. And during COVID, actually in 2021, we saw the highest spike in this indicator in the whole trend that we've been following at it. And this was at 17.5. Now, the new data that we have disclosed in the report that you've got with you actually showed that this rate dropped to 8.5% in 2022, which is obviously concerning if you consider the previous year. But I think we need to consider everything that's happened with COVID and why people, opted to go the entrepreneurial route, many of which was for necessity and not necessarily for opportunity. And I think what's happening now is we're moving back to pre-COVID rates, even a bit lower, but there's always a little bit of a lag. And hopefully we'll see this TR rate return to the normal trend that it's been following in the last 5-6 years before COVID.
Now, something I'd like us to hone in on is the success of entrepreneurs. Whilst hundreds of people or thousands of people go into entrepreneurship, not many of them have, the staying power or succeed. What are those official numbers from your report?
Yes. So, as I said, we measure quite a few indicators. So I'm just going to run through them because it will make sense if we talk about the entrepreneurial pipeline. So this is basically from intention, where you actually have a thought and you want to act on an idea and start a business within the very short foreseeable future. That then enters into nascent entrepreneurship, which is then where you actually started the business, but it's like brand new. Then it goes into what we call the new business rate, and those are businesses that are between under 3.5 years old. Then the TI is the combined of these two. Then the established business ownership rate, and those are the more established businesses that has sort of survived up till or more than 3.5 years. Those are the ones who settled in, they've stabilized, they've sort of, in most cases, appointed people, they're really contributing to the economy. And then, unfortunately, again, we get the discontinuous rate because, every cycle has got a maturity somewhere. So if we run through these figures, the latest figures, the nascent entrepreneurial rate was 5.8%. So that means 5.8% of the South African population are involved in nascent entrepreneurial activity. New business, 2.6. That's very low. The combined, the TR that we refer to is 8.5. Established businesses, only 1.8. And then the business discontinuance rate, 4.9. So if you look at those figures, if it continues in the trend where the discontinuance is higher than the established rate, eventually we're not going to have businesses anymore. So hopefully we can get that to turn around. And for that, we need what we call the enabling environment or conducive ecosystem for businesses to thrive in.
Yeah, and I know there are about 13 pointers, I think, to that enabling environment. Walk us through some of the key aspects that are missing in the South African context. Okay,
so yes, you're 100% correct. We measure this enabling environment, or what we call the entrepreneurial framework conditions, with 13 indicators. And unfortunately, it's measured out of 10, and obviously we are tracking 50 countries globally on this measurement, on all these measurements. So South Africa is just one of the countries we're tracking. And all our 13 indicators are below 5. 5 is the average, so it gets scored out of 10. So we are actually underperforming in all of these indicators. Now, just to quickly run through them, I'm not going to go through all of them because it's quite in-depth, but the main ones, entrepreneurial finance for new startups. We are struggling with that. There's too much red tape, too much bureaucracy. Institutions who finance small businesses are focusing much more on the collateral that they have instead of the idea and the potential of the business. Taxes, bureaucracy, everything to do with government programs. We know there's a lot of government programs and initiatives, but from the data, it seems that it's not getting to the people it should be, and it's not having the effect that we would want to see. Education is a huge problem. Now, education is a long-term factor that we want to see, because if you start educating people to think entrepreneurial from an early stage, it can have a massive impact in the future, as you know, because the youth is our future. And then things like infrastructure, we know we've been struggling with that for many years. Not only electricity, we're seeing infrastructure deteriorate in water, sewer, roads, rail. So it's really getting bad, and businesses need to move. They need electricity. So there's a few others, but for time, I'm not going to go into them. But those are the main things that I think is really hindering firstly the startup and the growth and the growth of new businesses and established businesses.
Professor Meyer, you talk about your studies, or you're tracking 50 markets, I think you indicated. Let's draw parallels to some of these markets. Are any of them emerging markets? Are they developed countries? Are those that are underdeveloped? Where do these markets rate, and how do we rate according to those markets?
So the GEM, as I said, there's about 50 or 51 countries. It differs every year. And if we look at the GEM, classifies countries under 3 levels. So level A is your most developed countries with GDP of $40,000 or more. Level B is your mid-level countries with GDP per capita of between 20 and 40. And then level C, where we also fall in, is your developing countries that has a GDP per capita of 20,000 or below US dollars. Now, there's 22 countries in the GEM that in level A, so the highly developed countries, 19 in level B, and then 13 in level C. So if we look at these 13 indicators, they are also explained as what we call the NECI, which is an index that sort of ranks the countries on this list, looking at a combined score of these 13 indicators. And the good thing is that from the previous report to this new one, we have rose 5 places. So we've risen 5 places from the bottom, but we're still pretty low. And I think we're at number 45 out of 50 at the moment, or 40th out of 50. So there is countries that's lower than us or doing worse. But we are the only country who have scored below or insufficient for all 13 of these indicators. And I think that is where the issue is. We really need to start looking at some of these specific indicators and this framework indicators. And obviously some of them is easier to address in the short term, some are more long term, but those are critical. And for us to move out of a state where we are really not providing a conducive business environment for small businesses to firstly start, survive and thrive, we need to address these indicators. And obviously, it's a whole debate on which ones goes first, but some are long term, some are systemic. Some of these indicators have been deteriorating for the last 20 years. And if it's not turned around, I think we're seeing, not necessarily good things for the South African economy as a whole.
And when you look at the greatest causes of failure for entrepreneurs, whether it's first time or others that have been a little bit longer on the scale, what are some of these factors?
Yes, so obviously with in exiting the back end of COVID, one of the biggest reasons for business failure was the COVID pandemic, which obviously also links to lack of sales, lack of market access, because a lot of people weren't buying. Buying power was lost. And then finance, one of the biggest things is definitely also finance, lack of finance. Businesses need finance, especially to start and to grow. And I think this is also one of the things why the TR rate spiked so much during the COVID time, is because it was easier for some businesses to start up due to the whole everything being online and the e-commerce thing that we saw with lockdown. So it was easier for businesses to enter, but then obviously it's not sustainable if you don't have a market or sufficient buying power from from customers and clients. So that's one of the things. And then a few of the other reasons is red tape, bureaucracy. Some of the businesses, depending on which sector they are obviously reliant on regulation, getting permits, that type of thing, and that sometimes hinders businesses. And some of the smaller reasons why businesses exited was either because they returned, the owner returned back to full employment in some other business, or they sold the business, or they just retired. So there's various reasons, but the main ones that stood out was due to lack of buying power during COVID, and then also finance constraints.
Professor, when we look at entrepreneurship, I mean, a big part of it is one's desire or ability to take risk, because that's essentially what it is. I mean, you're going into territory in many instances that you're not familiar with. Now, when you look at this in terms of gender, I think I was reading up on the GEM report from a couple of years ago, and it talks about 500 million new entrepreneurs, and I think close on half, of just under half, are women. Is one gender more likely to take risk than the other? Or what precedes that decision, if there ever is any between the genders, if you will?
Yes. So I think before I answer that specific question, I just want to explain a little bit about the whole intention and this mindset to start a business. So there's a few things that we also measure, which one is good career choice. So for anyone to cognitively decide to start a business, they need to think that it's a good career choice. Now at this stage, South Africa is scoring almost 80% in that, which is good. So people still see being an entrepreneur, having your own business as a good career choice. Then media attention, that's also one thing that we look at. And I've been, between myself and Angus, we've been on the radio and TV, 20 times in the last 2 days. So media attention is definitely there. We know that the media is making a big hype around businesses and entrepreneurship, and it should be there. And we see there 82%, so that's good. Entrepreneurs see perceived good opportunities, but lesser so, 60%. They also view that their capabilities is also at about 60%, and this is a combination of stuff that needs to be there. So you need to see opportunity, but you also need to think or know that you have capabilities. And then the last one is fear of failure, and unfortunately this has risen in the last few years. People are scared, and this is where the risk comes in. That's why I just had to tell the story so, it makes sense. So risk comes into fear of failure, and people who are less risk averse will have a lesser fear of failure and would be more prone to actually start and take that first step. Now, when we look at gender, unfortunately, it is still the case that females are more risk averse in most cases. They do tend to be less risky or less prone to starting things than males. But they're not significant. It's not like it's 20% to 80% or something like that. It is just slightly. But they also have a little bit of a higher fear of failure. We also see that in some cases, females are less likely to get finance, maybe because of a lack of collateral or lack of other things that are there. But one of the positive things, again, if we compare ourselves to some of these other countries also participating in the global rates, we are doing quite well on the gender line. There's a lot of countries who have a higher gender inequality when it comes to businesses than South Africa. And we're also seeing in some of the other instances like adoption of technology, sustainable development of business practices, where females or women are doing better, even slightly, but they're performing better than men in some of those areas. So yes, there is hope for, seeing more women start businesses and also becoming successful.
I'm glad you raised the issue of technology, because if you look at a lot of influencers, and again, I will single out women, many influencers that are on social media, and I don't know if these qualify as entrepreneurs, but they build vast fan bases or vast followers because they're selling various cosmetics, or they're working out in the gym and so on. Do they qualify as entrepreneurs?
Yes, definitely. I think this is also one thing that I specifically also noticed during the COVID time. I think if you're on Facebook and these social networks a lot, if you tick on something or click on something, the algorithm sees what you like, so you start seeing a lot of stuff, in my case, jewelry and makeup, So I've seen a lot of new small businesses set up by women that's mostly trading online that were never there. So there's definitely, and I think we need to see the positive sometimes in a negative situation. And in my opinion, COVID, one of the biggest positive things from COVID is that people started to move online. I think a lot of people were hesitant to put their product online. We were used to people going into shops and malls, etc. But these days, a lot of smaller businesses have increased almost tripled, doubled, whatever you want to call it, their market just by means of being on social media and having an e-commerce platform. They might have been selling their jewelry only in their little town or maybe in the adjacent towns. Now they have a market of the whole South Africa just because of e-commerce and because they really went into adopting technology. And in my opinion, we do see that a little bit more in women. It's as if they were more acceptant of change and going the technological way. But again, it is still increasing. We are seeing a trend, upward trend, fortunately, when it comes to technology adoption within small businesses in South Africa.
Professor Meyer, appreciate your time. Thanks for speaking to us. Professor Natanya Meyer from the University of Johannesburg and co-author of the Stellenbosch Business School South African Entrepreneurship Monitor Report.